Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the broadcast. I'm your host, Josh Reeves. This is Thursday, June 13th, 2019. So glad you could join me here for another edition of the show. Glad to be back here with you. I've been struggling to get back on air. We had a little bit of problems at the end of the month, first of the month, raising the money that we needed. We still came about $300 short. And then we got hit with this massive fucking crazy, insane hurricane type fucking storm here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And it's so bizarre because a couple of weeks ago, I got hit with this hailstorm. It was like it was only at my house. It was bizarre. I've never seen anything like it. It nobody else around the area. It literally hailed for an hour straight. I thought the windows were going to bust. Everything was crazy, and nobody else got any. And the National Weather, I was like, the National Weather Service didn't even show up on their radar. And then like 2 weeks later, over this past weekend, we had this storm here, and literally, other than just some like tree limbs and stuff blown off, nothing affected where I live, but like, right down the street, it was total chaos. I mean, there was trees uprooted. A fucking crane fell on an apartment building. Somebody died. Big, huge, old oak trees. No tornadoes were down. Trees all over Dallas was ripped out of the ground. A friend of mine had the whole apartment complex where he lives. He couldn't even leave for like a day. He was without power for like 3 or 4 days. There was like 250,000. I never lost power, thank goodness. And didn't have any storm damage or anything. But what we had was the internet out, which the internet only came on like 24 hours ago. It was out all fucking week, dude. And when you're somebody like me, it relies on that, and that's your money. I mean, it's bullshit. It's fucking the cable company. The thing about it was, here's what was weird about it, is it didn't even go out until like an hour after the storms ended, and then it stayed off until like about 24 hours ago. Crazy shit, but there's seems to be a lot of that. There's weird weather going on right now, and of course all the typical idiots will just holler climate change and all that bullshit, or global warming, whatever they're calling it this month. But as I've talked about many times before, really it boils down to one thing, and that has to do with the cycles of the sun. And that's one of the things that I really discovered and came across when I was doing my Lost Secrets of Ancient America work, was all this going to all these ancient sites and seeing how these, all these ancient sites, even the Rockwall, all of them have these alignments of the solstices and the equinoxes, and really started to see this pattern of these ancient sites encoding the knowledge of these cyclical events that have happened many times throughout history on this planet. And it seemed to coincide, not every time, but oftentimes, with huge mass extinction events. Well, of which there have been many on this planet, but that's one of the things that the elite have been hiding the knowledge of from us. And this has much to do with why they want to hide so much of this ancient knowledge and this stuff that's hidden in these ancient artifacts and in encoded into the earthworks, in the structures themselves. This is what they've been trying to keep a secret from us, these cyclical things. It's just like the real truth about religions and extraterrestrials and all that stuff. It's all designed and all hidden and kept from us so they can keep their structure in place indefinitely. If we all had the knowledge of these cyclical events and we knew, going to say, okay, well, We know this one happened here. They know all this. They're just keeping it from us because they're not going to tell us that they know. If they know for a fact that some cataclysm is going to happen in 2023 that's going to cause a mass extinction event, they're not going to tell us about it. But they're going to make contingencies, what they call continuity of government and all that. Whenever you hear them say continuity of government, really what it means is the way that the people in charge can survive while the rest of us die. And that's what they've been doing for many years. They've been building these secret underground facilities and building these huge underground facilities that stretch for thousands of miles. And who knows how far down they go. And they have this mass, super fast, speed of sound transportation system that's underground that goes between them and stuff. But yeah, we are now there's been no sunspots. I don't know how long it's been now, but there's been no sunspots visible and viewed on the sun. We're definitely going into a solar minimum. That's why, this week here in Dallas, and we're talking about this is second week of June. You got to understand, man, we're usually in a multi-100 degree temperatures by now. It's been getting down in the 60s at night. And not really getting hotter than maybe, mid 80s during the day. It's not usual weather for this time of year in North Texas, ladies and gentlemen. I can tell you, I've lived here my whole life. And, even as a kid, being a redhead, I just had to watch going out in the sun and shit. But there's definitely something going on that front. And another thing I was doing research into, I don't have time to go into it all now, but I was doing this research into, because a lot of people were saying, and I had friends and family stuff saying to me that people seem to be acting fucking weird this week, like they aren't acting fucking weird all the time. I get it, but particularly coinciding with the lack of sunspots. And I started finding all these studies that have been done, real medical studies. I never knew this existed, but it's a real thing. It's not a conspiracy theory. I found the real medical studies on it about how I think the study I found was from like 2004 even. But yeah, they've done analysis and done studies, and they found that there seems to be a very, very real and striking correlation between both solar maximums and solar minimums, and how both of those situations have major impacts on the mental health of humans. It's fascinating. I largely didn't know that. People all talk about the moon and, if that affects your mood, this, that, and the other, but it's really both. That's the duality, sort of the dualistic world we live in. But it's crazy that, where for all appearances, we're moving into a solar minimum. This is why you've got these unusual, so we had so much rain, all these storms, all this flooding, why there's been so many strange fireballs and meteors and stuff like that. And why I think, based on my own research, is why you have impact events like asteroids and meteors and comets and whatnot in the past that have been largely associated with these extinction level events, but not correctly associated with cycles of the sun, or maybe they have been correlated with it and we just haven't been told about it yet. But from my research, that's a huge thing, because especially when you start having stuff like, magnetic field reversal and pole reversal in the sun, which they said has been initiated and going on for quite some time now. Because there's an effect that happens where it's a change in the magnetic field of the sun. And what starts to happen is that a lot of these space rocks are pulled in to the sun's gravity during one of these pole reversals. And apparently, because of this highly volatile magnetic field state of the sun when it's going through one of these, it sort of pulls in with gravity these big space rocks, but then also, as it's reversing and stuff, tends to throw them back out with an equally as great a force as they're being pulled in. And this is when you start to see them being hurtled at Earth, towards the direction of Earth. And this is why we're starting to see such an increase in these recently, when we hadn't seen them on Earth for such a long time. I've commented on that before. I always thought there was something about the meteor craters and whatnot that we see on Earth that we haven't been being told all the whole truth about, because with the ones we've, it should be, we're led to believe anyway, we should be seeing more of these. And they just, whenever anybody brings up, well, just God doesn't want it that way or something, like, come on. You can't just say that. Now, it's because of the reason we don't know everything there is to know about craters and impacts on the Earth is because we don't know and haven't been allowed to know everything that the elites know about these sun cycles that the ancient people knew about. And this is why there's been so much and so many attempts to keep this stuff a secret and keep it hidden from us. It's these knowledge of these cyclical events. I've talked about that movie that many times, Knowing, with Nicolas Cage. But I'm telling you, it's going to be just like that. They fucking didn't tell me. He found out it was going on his own. Nobody believed him. And then, of course, as it starts happening, they don't fucking tell anybody it's happening until basically we're all pretty much dead anyway. I think that's how, they're going to, I thought that was the interesting thing about that movie, was that element of it. And then, as I showed you in Spellcasters 1, you had the same guy that made that movie went on to do that Egypt movie where they had the flat earth stuff in it. And you look at that guy's pedigree and stuff. That guy who made those movies, man, he's in the know about shit. That's what's, and the stuff with the Pleiadians in there. And yeah, I mean, that movie Knowing's fucking nuts, dude. There's some serious shit encoded in that movie, man. And, yeah, it's just been wild seeing all this unusual weather, and it all has to do with the sun. And I talked about this on the show before. I don't like to go crazy on shit where I'm just speculating, but I don't know, with all the stuff that they've been trying to do, all this off-world stuff, and it seems the elites have been trying to figure out ways to get off planet, and how they're trying to figure out how to get off planet and whatnot. I don't think we've been told any. I think there's a possibility too. I've got some more stories. I've got another story pertaining to this I'll get to here in the show tonight. That pertains to this, exactly what I'm talking about here, strangely enough. But yeah, it does seem that the sun very well may be using up its fuel faster than we're being told, and our sun may be moving towards becoming a white dwarf sooner than expected. Wasn't that the plot in the sequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey? Remember that, 2010, the year we made contact? Yeah, that they, or something like, remember they went to, it was like Jupiter, and the fucking black monolith starts replicating itself, and it turns Jupiter into a second sun, and then turns one of the moons into a habitable planet. Yeah. So anyway, I got a lot I got a lot of stuff to cover for you here on the show tonight. I got a lot of news. I'm going to get through all. We got to get through all these stories. I got a lot to talk about and get into. It's good to be back with you here again. But right out of the gates, I got to let you know that again, we came up $300 short the first of the month. We've only gotten about $20 in all month right now. Our goal for the week is $300. We need to raise that ASAP right now, and at the latest by the end of the day on Friday, because we've got other stuff we got to cover. We came up short on that money. We a lot, like I said before, getting demonetized by YouTube twice, that's hurt us as well, and we got to make that money up somewhere. And because that was stuff I was relying on to pay, keep the lights on and the rest of the stuff, bills that we have in the middle of the month, fees and stuff we have for the sales of the videos and the hosting of the archives and all that stuff. That all comes due around this time of the month, and I've been basically sitting around here with my thumb up my ass, waiting for the internet to come back on. And then, of course, they take their sweet ass time getting it turned back on, and as soon as they get it turned back on, they send you a bill. Like, motherfucker. No excuse for that shit being out as long as it was, considering that where I'm sitting, there was not really anything bad. But anyway, that's the way it is. So, hit up the contribution banner. Everybody contribute what you can. Again, got to raise at least 300 by tomorrow. More than that would be even better. But just go and get what you can. Also, again, go check out the download shop. All my films, audiobooks. I still get people sending me stuff all the time. Oh, how come you don't talk about this? Well, I have talked about it, but I would like to conversely ask you why you've never gone to my download shop and bought my stuff. If you had, you wouldn't be asking me this question about this subject. Somebody the other day sent me an email and wanted me to, basically tell them everything I know about Atlantis. I'm not going to sit here and tell you everything I know about something in a fucking email when I've made, I got 2 audiobooks in the download shop on Atlantis, and got Lost Secrets of Ancient America where I talk about this shit. I've covered it ad nauseum. People listen to these audiobooks that I didn't even give permission to be uploaded to YouTube many years ago. And then they think that's all I've done. Listen, the only official Josh Reeves channel on YouTube is this one. It says Josh Reeves, the Global Reality Channel. Any other channels you see that have my shit uploaded to it, that's not me. Okay, I've had people fucking send me messages saying, I sent you a message and you didn't respond back to me. Where'd you send it to? I sent it on such and such YouTube. That's not me. If it doesn't say Josh Reeves, the Global Reality Channel on YouTube, but it's my stuff, and that's not somebody uploaded that shit to their own channel. That's not any official stuff of mine, okay? All my work, all the stuff that I've done, it's all in the download shop. All my documentary films, all the audiobooks are all in there. You can get multi-packs we've got on sale now, where you can save a few bucks on buying packs with multiple films in them. Lost Secrets of Ancient America 1 and 2 together. Secret Rite 1 and 2 together. Spellcasters 1 and 1.5 together, and we've got 1 pack in there. You can save over $150, I think it is, if you're buying them individually. You can get everything in the download shop, everything I've done in 1 pack, 1 download pack for $175. So hit that up as well. Let's just get into it. I covered this story. It's interesting. I remember covering this story when I first went on air. I had a flashback when I read this because I remember covering this. And I remember saying, I think it was back in 2008 when I covered this. And I remember saying at the time that something seemed shady about this, and something didn't seem right, like they were hiding something. And sure enough, I was right, but I still think there's something shady about this as well. Recordings by Elton John, Nirvana, and thousands more lost in fire. A New York Times investigation has revealed that decades of Universal Music Group's treasures burned in 2008. Universal Music Group is one of these groups that these conglomerates, and what they do is they buy up artist catalogs and whatnot. What a lot of guys do, the Twisted Sister guys did this a couple of years ago. Rush did this a couple of years ago. I believe Queen did it too. what a lot of these guys do, especially, you got to consider these guys' ages now, these old rock stars and stuff. In their late 60s, early 70s, a lot of them, some older than that. And, they know that they don't have a lot of time left. And, yeah, it's great getting royalties from your past stuff, but when you really look at what the stuff's worth, realistically, these guys are not going to live long enough to see the real money from their catalog, especially when your band's got a big catalog of multi-decades like Rush or Queen or something like that. So, what a lot of these guys are doing, I know for a fact Rush did this, because when I saw they did this, that's when I knew they were never coming back. I was like, I was kind of holding out hope there for a while that maybe they might do another tour or make another record. But when you see a band sell the rights to their catalog to like a Universal Music Group, that's when you know it's over. And Rush did that. And basically what these guys do, because I heard Dee Snider from Twisted Sister talking about this in an interview, because they did this too. Because they retired a couple of years ago and did the same thing. What they do is they sell the rights of their catalogs to somebody like Universal Music Group, and they take, basically what they do is, instead of getting royalty checks over time and getting residuals, they give these guys a big fat lump sum up front. And it's basically like a deal for however many years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it might be. So a lot of these artists are doing it because that allows them to, they might make $1 million a year or however much, or maybe more than that, maybe less than that. But these conglomerates are giving these guys $50 million, $100 million, boom, cash right up, here, just one lump sum. And then they're able to take that money and enjoy it, retire, do whatever they want to do on top of what they've already gotten from sales and touring and everything else, merchandise. And it's basically, cashing out. That's what these guys do. But apparently, like I said, I remember covering this fire when it broke out. But apparently there's been a massive cover-up over the past 11 years. And what was lost, music-wise, was much more significant than they ever let on about. Now, here's the thing that's fishy about this. Because I swear I talked about this not even a month ago on the show. I don't remember what show it was. It was one of the more recent shows I've done. Remember I talked about the Jack and Ozzy's World Detour thing? Remember I told you about, they went to the fucking Cheyenne Mountain and all that, NORAD, where NORAD is. They went they have those vaults there. And that they store fucking everything in those vaults. Photos, movies, master tapes. And apparently there was this fire in 2008 that was happening at Universal Studios Hollywood. At the time, the company said the blaze had destroyed the theme park's King Kong attraction in a video vault that contained only copies of old works. But according to an article published on Tuesday by the New York Times Magazine, the fire also tore through an archive housing treasured audio recordings, amounting to what the piece described as the biggest disaster in the history of the music business. Now, again, this doesn't make sense because, number one, nobody keeps these distribution houses and these production studios. If they do keep anything on site. It just doesn't make sense that they would have had this at Universal Studios. It just doesn't make sense that they would have kept a vault. Film I can see because they were making, at Universal Studios, they actually, you could take tours of that and shit, but it actually was a physical working TV and movie production studio. So I can understand why they might have some film there. But to hear what also audio they had, it just doesn't make any sense. And because these people have been keeping this, they have fireproof vaults for this stuff. This is relying on people's sheer ignorance of how this stuff is done. And not only that, a lot of times these are copies of masters. These studios rarely keep the master recordings at their production houses. They usually have those off-site in other locations. They're usually in fireproof vaults that can withstand virtually anything. But not only that, most of the time the masters a lot of these guys keep around, they're copies of the master. They're not the actual original 2-inch tapes from the sessions that they were recorded on. Because in analog recording, what you would do is you record onto a 2-inch tape. If you're just doing strictly analog, let's say, you're recording back in the days before digital and computers or anything, you would record onto either 1-inch or 2-inch analog tape, and then you would mix everything down and master it onto 1/4-inch, which is like the basic, like the home reel-to-reel tape players. That's 1/4-inch. 2-inch is the big, fat, thick tape. That's what master tapes are recorded on. So they would record everything on the 2-inch tape, and then as they'd mix everything down to the final master, which would be on the 1/4-inch machine, and then that master on the 1/4-inch tape is what they would take, and that would be the master tape. But there's two different types of master tapes. There's the master tape that you recorded on, that you track the sessions and you track each track of the recording on. That's the 2-inch tape. That's a 2-inch master. Okay, but then there's a second separate master tape that the album is mixed onto from the original 2-inch masters. And then that recording is taken. That's what vinyl's pressed from. That's what cassettes are pressed from, CDs pressed from, whatever. Right? And what they're doing is they're just, they know people don't know this, so they're not telling people this. So they're saying that a bunch of master recordings got burned in the fires, but they're not being specific about, they're basically saying a lot of these are the 2-inch masters and whatnot, but the thing about it is, some of these records since this fire, you got to think, you had the 20th anniversary of Nirvana's Nevermind album in, would have been, 2011? Okay, so the fire happened in 2008. But in 2011, didn't they come out with 20th anniversary Nevermind remastered and all that? No, they've come out with some Nirvana remasters in this decade. But that would be impossible to do if the Nirvana master tapes were gone. You see what I'm saying? And I don't believe them Nirvana. They're saying Nirvana, Tupac, a bunch of, they're saying they're gone. And again, something shady about this. This is either an insurance scam. This is something where, because they wouldn't have had, when you hear this list, I'll read it to, I'll finish the article and get to it here in a minute. But when you see there's just no way anyone would have been that negligent, and you're a fool to believe anybody would have been. Because let's say that you're in a band, you're in a big band. Let's just say you're in fucking, I can't even think of, just fucking pick a band. Let's say you're in fucking Foo Fighters. Their first album came out in 1995. It's 2015, and you want to do which I'm sure they did. You want to do the 20th anniversary edition of the first Foo Fighters album, right? Well, what they would do is they would go to, they don't go, most cases, sometimes if you'll see, because how many Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon versions have there been? And, a lot of people don't know what these terms, sometimes it'll say remixed, if it's remastered, generally what that means is they took the final mixed down tape, which would have been the 1/4-inch tape, and they transferred it to digital, because the sampling rates for digital were different when digital was new and when CDs were first started being produced, mass produced in the 1980s. Sampling rates were very different. That's why when you listen to earlier CDs, they don't sound as good as later ones, because the sampling rate got better. And even though the sampling rates for CDs taps out at 44.1 thousand kilohertz at 16-bit, we're now recording digital sampling. It's way higher than that now. But if you record a CD, it's still at that original sample rate. So a lot of the early CDs were all 8-bit, then they became 16-bit. So if you wanted to do a new remaster, you wouldn't go and pull the 2-inch tapes unless you didn't have a copy of the 1/4-inch master. And when the digital age first started coming into play and digital recordings started getting cheaper and becoming the thing, this is even back in the late 80s, early 90s, most of the record labels all had their catalogs digitized. And the format at the time that everybody was using was DAT tape, which was digital audio tape, which when digital recording came in, that's what replaced the 1/4-inch master. So in the late 80s, in the 90s, on into up until the Pro Tools era, a lot of the big records that were still being recorded analog on 2-inch tape, but instead of those 2-inch tape being mixed down to the 1/4-inch tape master, you would mix down from the 2-inch tape to a DAT. And who really did this before anybody was really doing it was Fleetwood Mac on their album Tusk, which was the follow-up to their quadrillion platinum fucking Rumors album. And I can't even listen to Rumors anymore. There was a time where I wouldn't have lived without a copy of that record around. I can't even listen to it anymore. I prefer Tusk. I mean, I think Tusk is a much better record, but it was panned at the time when it came out. But it's a fantastic record. But what's significant about it is the recording, because Fleetwood Mac they were running into problems, because every time when you go back over with analog, every time you do another overdub and rewind the tape, it starts to wear out and oxidize. And the first thing to go when you have a analog tape starts to deteriorate, the first thing to go is the top end, is the high end of the audio. So in the late 70s, when they were recording Tusk, it's basically like the precursor to ADAT machines, because you had DAT, digital audio tape, but then you had ADAT, which came around later. And basically what ADAT machines were, that was the first thing I ever recorded on when I first started being in bands in the early 90s. That was the technology at the time. So all the studios, unless they, were somewhere, were still doing analog, but most of them by that time were doing ADATs. And ADATs were basically, they were VCRs. That's all they really were. But you had the ability to multi-track onto a digital VHS cassette. And they would, about 8 tracks per machine is what you could get. So they would, some would have 16, 24, 32, and have 3 or 4 of these machines. But when Fleetwood Mac recorded Tusk, in order to keep their masters from, losing the sound that they had when they recorded, they were mixing down. This is crazy, before ADATs or anything. You can look this up. It was basically like a digital cassette recorder, like a digital VHS that they were using in TV production studios in that time. And so with those, you have, when you're doing audio and video stuff, you'd have, your source audio, whatever, and source video, and it's feeding into, it's the same principle as audio, and it's feeding into another machine is recording it as a master, right? So Fleetwood Mac and their production team started using it on the Tusk album. This is why, at the time in which Tusk was made, it was the most expensive album made up to that time. Previously to that was A Night at the Opera by Queen. That was the most expensive album it was ever made up to that point. And then it was surpassed by Tusk, and then later surpassed by Metallica and the god-awful Black Album. And it's been surpassed many times since then. But at the time when Fleetwood Mac made Tusk, that was one of the things that made the cost of it go up, because they were literally using cut. That was the first album. I believe it was the first album that was digitally mastered. It was recorded analog, but mastered onto digital machines, so that when they recorded them, did a mix down to digital, they didn't lose any quality every time they did it, because it was digital. And when you listen to the Tusk album, you can tell. You could listen to it and then listen to earlier Fleetwood Mac stuff or earlier recordings and that, and you can really tell, because it sounds pristine. You can hear all the notes on the snare and on the acoustics and stuff. That's because it was, even though it was recorded analog, it was mastered to digital. And to me, that's still the best way of recording any kind of music, is to record it analog and then master it digitally. Recording all digitally is just sucks. It's cold and brittle. You can't get good drum sounds with digital. It just sucks. But what they're saying is, they're basically saying none of this adds up. They covered this up for 11 years, and now they're saying that a bunch of stuff that they're not giving any reason why they didn't disclose what was destroyed. There's something going on here. There's some kind of chicanery going on here. There's some kind of inside job insurance scam thing going on here. And they're banking on you not knowing that they got all this shit stored in a fucking, what is essentially a giant Faraday cage. You could hit that motherfucker continuously with nukes for 100 years and it still wouldn't fucking bust. That's where they store everything, and they want us to believe they didn't store all this. Well, I'll just get into it. The fire started in the early hours of June 1st, 2008. Overnight, maintenance workers had used blowtorches to repair the roof of a building on the set of a New England street, a group of colonial buildings used in scenes for movies and television shows. The workers followed protocol and waited for the shingles they worked on to cool, but the fire broke out soon after they left, just before 5 a.m. The flames eventually reached building 6197, known as the Video Vault, which housed videotapes, film reels, and crucially, a library of master sound recordings owned by Universal Music Group. Hundreds of firefighters responded to the fire. After trying to douse it with a foam retardant and water from a nearby lake, emergency personnel decided to dismantle the warehouse containing the vault to more easily put out the fire. See, that right there, that's where they get me at. They dismantled the warehouse containing the vault. Even still, those vaults are built to withstand fire and everything else. What was lost? Almost all the master recordings stored in the vault were destroyed in the fire, including those produced by some of the most famous musicians since the 1940s. In a confidential report in 2009, Universal Music Group estimated that it lost about 500,000 song titles. The lost works most likely include masters in the Decca Records collection by Billie Holiday, Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Al Jolson, Bing Crosby, Ella Fitzgerald, and Judy Garland. The fire probably also claimed some of Chuck Berry's greatest recordings produced for Chess Records, as well as the masters of some of Aretha Franklin's first appearances on record. Almost all of Buddy Holly's masters were lost. My God. As were most of the John Coltrane's masters. But again, This is something odd about this. There are still masters that exist of these records. They're not saying whether these are see, it says almost all of Buddy Holly's masters were lost. It says his masters were lost. It doesn't say master tapes. The session tapes and master tapes are two different things. But the way that they report on this and talk about this, they talk about them as if they are the same thing, and they're not. Master tapes, the session tapes being lost. But, I mean, there still exists. Listen, they're still, obviously, I can tell you, I can almost guarantee you, there's been new versions of all these recordings they mentioned here put out since this fire happened. So where do they get those from? Well, I believe I talked about this on another show too. There was a couple of Thin Lizzy records, I believe. I know for sure the Black Rose record, which they just recently reissued two from that. I remember hearing that that's why when I buy, listen, if you're buying, I've talked about this before, I got to talk about it again. If you're buying vinyl, unless you're buying something that says it was mastered from the original analog tapes in analog and it's new, don't buy it. Especially if it's older catalog stuff, get the originals. The majority of these new vinyl records that are coming out, while they get you with stuff like 180 gram vinyl and all that, which is great. You know, you want that. You want the thick, nice, heavy vinyl over some of the thin bullshit that they used to put out. The problem is some of the newer record players they make don't play the newer vinyls as well. They have skips. They don't play right. And most of them, unless they say they're from the original analog tapes, they're just nothing but CD rips onto vinyl. And they sound like it, and they don't sound good. So if you're into vinyl and you're into collecting vinyl and stuff like I am, and I have been, I've never stopped collecting vinyl. I mean, resurgence, non-resurgence, never. I've always, all through the CD era and the digital era, I've always still been buying records. The only difference is now you can get a fucking badass belt drive turntable and a fucking tube preamp and shit for a couple of $100 on Amazon, which that would have cost you a couple of grand in the past. So they're either, it's strange because obviously they were obfuscating about this and they were trying to keep this a secret, not letting people know what was lost. But at the same time, I know for a fact they've still been. So they've got copies, you know, even if they tell you that all of Buddy Holly's masters were lost. See, they're not saying master tapes. It just says masters. And that would mean that the masters that were lost were all the versions that were bounced down to 1/4-inch tape before being pressed from the original. It wouldn't have even been 2-inch tape when Buddy Holly was recording. It would have been literally probably 1/4-inch tape, 1-inch tape back then, 4-track at the most, probably 2-track, mono at most. They may have had two machines daisy chained together at that point, but it would have been mono, and it would have been everything coming in on a mixer, you know, 1 or 2 mics at most on the drums, everything recorded live in a room. And that's, to me, the best. That's the way music's supposed to be recorded anyway. I mean, yeah, it sounds great to overdub and track stuff, but man, if you got a hot band and that band's fucking tight, it is a travesty to make that band track everything individually, because that's not what they do. A band is meant to play together. And that's some of my favorite recordings, man. Listen to, like, a good example of that is, there's so many. Hot Legs by Rod Stewart. Listen to that song. That's a fucking sound of a hot band live as fuck in a studio. Everything's mic'd, everything's set up, go. The Buddy Holly stuff was done like that too. A lot of the early stuff, the first Black Sabbath album was done like that. And that's just a band of a fuck. That's not overdubs, man. That's the sound of a band plugged in live in a fucking room. Listen to Oasis, the first Oasis album. They had to record it 3 times because they couldn't get that sound. Because they were going to all these posh studios, and the people, when you go to studios, they want you to do stuff the way they do things, which is to do it track by track, do the drums first, and then build everything up from that. And I've heard some of the early versions of that, and it just didn't sound right. Finally, they got to a studio where they set everybody up and just recorded it as like they would when they were rehearsing or something, and that got the sound. But, if Buddy Holly's masters were lost, that means that all the copies from the session tapes are what got lost. Which means, theoretically, the master session tapes still exist somewhere. But regardless, listen, all those recordings are out there. They're out there. They're not gone. And if you captured those digitally anytime in the past 20 years, which they have, even before this fire, then you're good. Because, you're not going to go back and remix that shit. What are you going to do? You're going to go back and fucking remix That'll Be the Day by Buddy Holly. You're going to get the master tape and put it on some gear. And, come on. You're not going to do that. People want to hear it the way that it was mixed. And, you can remaster stuff and clean stuff up and make it sound better. And they've done that with a lot of recordings. But something's going on with this. I just don't believe it. Let me go through the list here. Most of John Coltrane's masters in the Impulse Records collection. The Fire also claimed numerous hit singles, likely including Bill Haley and his Comets, Rock Around the Clock, Etta James At Last, the Kingsmen's Louie Louie. The list of artists affected spans decades of popular music. It includes recordings by Ray Charles, B.B. King, The Four Tops, Joan Baez, Neil Diamond, Sonny and Cher, Joni Mitchell, Cat Stevens, Gladys Knight and the Pips, Al Green, Elton John, Eric Clapton, Jimmy Buffett, The Eagles, Aerosmith, Rufus and Chaka Khan, Barry White, Patti LaBelle, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, The Police, Sting, Steve Earle, R.E.M. Basically everything great that's ever been made. R.E.M., Janet Jackson. We're talking about full catalogs here. Steve Earle, R.E.M., Janet Jackson, Guns N' Roses, Mary J. Blige, No Doubt, Nine Inch Nails, Snoop Dogg, Nirvana, Beck, Sheryl Crow, Tupac Shakur, Eminem, 50 Cent, and The Roots. Now, let's see what they get into now, and this is where the bullshit comes in. What are master recordings and why do they matter? A master recording is the one-of-a-kind original recording of a piece of music. It's the source from which other vinyl records, CDs, MP3s, and all other recordings are made. And, See? That's what I'm telling you. Even the motherfucker that wrote this goddamn article. These people don't know what they're talking about. It says a master recording is the one-of-a-kind original recording of a piece of music. Yes, you're right if you're talking about the master tape that's made from the recordings. It's the source from which other vinyl records, CDs, MP3s, and all other recordings are made. According to the article, documents show that the vault contained masters dating back decades, including multi-track recordings on which individual instruments remained isolated from one another. That's the studio session tapes. There were also session masters. See what I'm saying? They don't know what the fuck they're talking about here. There were also session masters, including recordings that had never been commercially released. The recordings within the vault came from some of the most important record labels of all times. Audiophiles and audio professionals view such recordings with special regard. A master is the truest capture of a piece of recorded music. Sonically, masters can be stunning in their capturing of an event in time. Every copy thereafter is a sonic step away. Right, but not in the digital age. See, this is why they're trying to confuse people here and baffle people with bullshit. Because they just mix 3 different things together as one. session masters are the multi-track masters. That's what they're supposed to be called. That's the multi-track tape. That's the 2-inch tape. So they're not being specific about which of these artists had session master tapes destroyed and which of them just had master tapes destroyed, which, or again, is what they're saying here. It's a copy of a copy. And yeah, every copy of a copy that you make in analog, yes, it degrades each time you make a copy of it. But all of these artists that they named, especially a lot of them were, created during the digital age, where even when they were being made, the master tape, as long as you've got a master tape, which is basically a vinyl, if you've got a perfect vinyl copy of a record, that's a master tape, essentially a master tape. That's what I was saying about the Thin Lizzy record, the Black Rose record. When they went to do the digital remaster of that, they came out with a new one recently. I haven't heard it to compare it to the other ones with you. I know for a fact when they first came out with it on CD, they couldn't find the master tapes. And so the first pressings of the CDs up until the one that came out this year, and maybe even that one too, I don't know. But the original ones, I know for a fact, because I remember reading this, were taken from the vinyl record source. So, again, it's weird. This is such a weird story. Because on one end, you're like, yeah, we should be freaking out about this. Yeah, this is not good. And on the other end, though, if you actually know what you're talking about, like I do when it's in terms of music recording, how it works, it also doesn't make sense. Because if there weren't master files of these recordings, folks, you wouldn't have Nirvana's 20th anniversary Nevermind come out in 2011. They wouldn't have been able to remix it, remaster it, if they didn't have the master tape, right? Something's going on with this. At the time, the fire made news around the world, and the vault featured heavily in that coverage, but most articles focused only on the video recordings in the archive, and even then, news outlets largely characterized the disaster as a crisis averted. Jody Rosen, the writer of the article, described the successful effort to play down the scope of the loss as a triumph of crisis management that involved officials working for the Universal Music Group on both coasts. Those efforts were undoubtedly aimed at minimizing public embarrassment, but some suggest the company was also particularly worried about a backlash from artists in the artists' estates whose master recordings had been destroyed. Yeah, they were afraid of getting sued. That's okay. No, I get it. The real extent of the loss was laid out in litigation and company documents obtained by Mr. Rosen, contributing writer for the magazine. Mr. Rosen described the loss as historic, and even Universal Music Group itself privately viewed what happened in bleak terms. Loss in the fire, undoubtedly a huge musical heritage. Record companies have had a troubled history with such recordings and have been known to trash them in bulk. Decades ago, employees of CBS Records reportedly took power saws to multi-track masters to sell the reels as scrap metal. In the 1970s, RCA destroyed masters by Elvis Presley in a broader purge. Because of that history, industry professionals have long questioned how committed the major music labels are to preserving what they see as priceless artifacts. Today, most commercial recordings of the past century and beyond are controlled by only 3 giant record companies: Sony Music Entertainment, Warner Music Group, and of course, Universal Music Group. And that's all they give you. So, yeah, again, back in, when this first happened too, this is before you had streaming like you have now. This was before the resurgence of vinyl like you have now, where, there are companies and people like Jack White who are now, that's Jack White from the White Stripes. He didn't make all his money from playing in bands and all the different bands and stuff he had from the White Stripes and all that. That dude has made all his money from pressing vinyl, because there was very few vinyl pressing plants left after the rise of the digital era. So when he created his own with Third Man Records for many years, he was the only game in town. There are tons of people who are, still do have their stuff pressed with him because he has all the original lathes and all the original machines. He does crazy shit like, recording live, on stage sessions at cutting them straight to records and stuff like that. But see, around the time this fire happened, that was still very much, the MP3 iPod era. Everybody was listening to music around that time, largely in some sort of digital form or another. And I think that they were probably, what it sounds like, because it said they were worried about getting sued by artist estates and all this stuff. And they probably also knew that people were going to start, asking questions like, well, hey, how could you sell me a Buddy Holly greatest hits remastered collection on iTunes in 2019 if the master files were destroyed and the master tapes were recorded in 2009? So that's clearly what's going on here. Is, did you notice how they didn't say what records they were? Particularly they didn't tell you what Nirvana records that were destroyed. Particularly they didn't tell you what Tom Petty and the Heartbreaker records were destroyed. Particularly they didn't tell you what Tupac records were destroyed. And yeah, I think there's something to. Listen, as far as I know, all three of those major music groups that control everything that's ever been recorded, literally, all store their master tapes at Cheyenne Mountain, at NORAD. In that fucking, again, watch that episode. You should watch that whole episode of Ozzy and Jack's World Detour, where they go there. It's fascinating. You just don't get that kind of look, and like I talked about before. Jack even says, who got them access to be able to go there? His mother, of course, Sharon, of course. So it seems like they're trying to, like they're trying to capitalize on this, something. It's a bizarre story. I guess I could sit here and fucking wonder about it all day. But there's just something, they're not being, obviously we know they have not been upfront about this. They've lied about this for over 10 years, the extent of it. But they're also not being very specific on which recordings were lost, which versions of what recordings were lost. Even there in the article, they try to give us that little half-ass explanation of what a master tape is, and they combine three different things together. They don't know what it is. So, again, you have, yes, if you have multi-track masters and master tapes, both stored in the same place, and both of them are destroyed, yeah, that sucks. But, and yeah, it's a terrible loss. But at the same time, those recordings are out there. They're out there in the highest quality digital formats. They're on hard drives somewhere. They're not all lost. So in a way, yeah, it's bad, but it's not as bad as it sounds. But then again, why have they been covering it up? I mean, this whole thing just boggles the mind. Clearly, we aren't being told the whole truth here about this. And again, like they do with anything else we've talked about, they bank on people's ignorance and bank on people not knowing better, not even knowing about these things, not knowing a master tape from a session tape or whatever. I don't know, maybe they're going to use that to jack up the pro, I mean, all those recordings are all out there. Those recordings are not going to be there. At this point, there's so many copies that, yes, again, it just depends on the extent of what's been lost, but all those recordings, they're all out there. You can get them on original vinyls. You can get them on CDs. You can get them on MP3, streaming. None of that music's gone anywhere, and it's never going to go anywhere. But there's definitely some kind of chicanery going on with why they would cover this up. beyond just the obvious stuff of, not one get sued by estates or anything else. And, these things are big money. Somebody could have very easily claimed these things were burned up and destroyed. I just don't know how you could have, if they were in a vault, even if you, like they said, they dismantled the building around the vault. Still, those vaults, man, they're thick concrete, reinforced steel. They're vaults. They're called vaults for a reason, because they're meant to withstand anything. To me, what it sounds like is going on is it sounds like some, inside job, Jewish lightning type shit, where you claim something's been destroyed, collect the insurance. Obviously, those recordings were insured. Notice how they don't mention anything about how much those recordings would have been insured for, because obviously, clearly, they had to have all those things insured. Company of that size would have to have all their master tapes and all that stuff insured 100%. But notice how that doesn't get brought up in the conversation. That, again, like everything, follow the money. That right there tells you what's really going on here, because they could easily claim these tapes were destroyed, and even if they had to show evidence that they were destroyed, if they just showed them, a case that kept a master tape in, just like they know the average person doesn't know the difference between a multi-track session master and a master recording, which is essentially a copy of the original session tapes. They could very easily, when they're doing an insurance claim that these have been destroyed. Meanwhile, they've got the actual ones somewhere and they're selling them off to somebody else, and maybe even shipping them out of the country and selling them off to somebody else for billions of dollars. That, to me, seems like something that could be going on here. Something's going on here, because it just doesn't add up, because there's no fucking way in hell you're going to lead me to believe that they had those in some shiny vault that some fire could have destroyed on the goddamn set, the Universal Studios, where they've got fucking tourists coming in. Give me a fucking break. They build those vaults to be that way, fireproof and all that, for a reason. Somebody's ripping somebody off. Here's what's going on. And very well it could be, just like listen, man, these guys don't even want to pay the fucking artists when they're alive. As you're going to see in Spellcasters too. I mean, Randy Rhoads, man, up there probably with Buddy Holly and Nirvana, Kurt Cobain, as the shortest, most influential careers ever. I mean, Randy, we got what, 2 records? 2 records out of him? 2 records in a live album? Not counting whatever he did with Quiet Riot before he was with Ozzy. He never saw a dime. Never saw a dime. That man has influenced more guitar players through the years probably than anybody besides Eddie Van Halen and Chuck Berry. He never saw a dime of his money, and his own mother had to fight Sharon Osbourne, because Sharon Osbourne didn't even want to pay what Randy was owed to his family after he died. And they sure hate paying out millions of dollars to, children and grandchildren, these recordings. Oh, well, we lost the master tapes, so, you're only going to get money on these copies or whatever, these editions now, because it's whatever. Anyway, I'll move on. God, I can't believe I talked about that for that long, but fuck. Crazy shit. Oh, there's been a lot of significant deaths in the world of music in the past couple of weeks, too. But this week, the biggest one this week, without question, was, and I put something on our Global Reality Facebook page about this, That's really hit me hard because I was a huge fan, man. But the death of Bushwick Bill from the Ghetto Boys, man, I could sit here and just talk about that all day. I was a huge Ghetto Boys fan. When I was in middle school, I guess. Yeah, when I was in middle school, I was back in the early 80s and or late 80s and early 90s. I was really into, I was a teen, early teens and stuff. Man, I was really into, into the horror films of the time, really into, Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th and all the B horror movies of the time too, like fucking Dead Alive and House and all those movies. And Child's Play. And I had this friend at school, and me and some friends, this is how I got into hip hop at a young age. It was because back then it was like sheer entertainment, like comedy entertainment. Like you would listen to hip hop, it was a totally different thing. And if you weren't around back then, it's hard for people to wrap their minds around this. Because back then hip hop was not like it is now, where it's, a major part of the culture or whatever. Back in those days, it was like, especially the dirties, it was underground stuff, and people passed around tapes, and and everybody was trying to one-up each other on how dirty it was. I remember, God, it was probably fifth grade. Somebody gave me fifth or sixth grade, I got the 2 Live Crew tape. I remember that was the first one I got, and that was filthy as fuck. Oh, it was dirty. It had all the dirty, all that dirty shit. And then after that, I got a copy. Somebody gave me a cassette of NWA, the first album. And that was just completely game-changing. That was just on a whole other level. I mean, just words and things. And you just laugh. We'd listen to that tape for hours and just laugh and roll around the stuff they would say, roll around the carpet. And then somebody at school, this rumor started going around. Excuse me, that there was a rumor going around that there was a rap song out about Chucky. And man, that shit set me on fire. I was like, I gotta fucking hear. No fucking way. I asked around for months and months. I tried to fucking find this. I could not find it. I didn't find anybody even. I'd go to like record stores, at the mall or something, and be like, you guys have a rap song about Chucky? And they would just look like, what the fuck are you talking about, kid? Get the fuck out of here, Fucking rap song about Chucky. What the fuck, you're making shit? People said I was making it up. Like, no, I'm not making it up. And then finally somebody's like, I found it. And they came to school and they gave me the tape. And it was the Ghetto Boys. And there was this song called Chucky. Oh, fuck. Chuck's on a killing spree. and he's, this guy, and he's kind of sounded Jamaican, and he's like singing from the perspective of being Chucky. Like he is Chucky. I mean, that was the beginning of horrorcore. That was of like horror rap. That was like the beginning of it right there. I might be small, but my nuts are big. The worst thing that you could do is let me keep your fucking kids. That just cracked me up, man. I was like, what in the fuck is this? And you see the cover, and he's got this little fucking midget guy on there. I'm like, what the shit is this? This is a fucking, they got a midget rapping about like he's like from the perspective of he's Chucky. Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play? I just, when I first heard that, dude, I fucking died. I was falling around on the fucking ground, laughing so fucking hard. I listened to that song so many times. It was so hilarious. My name is Chucky. Some say I'm insane. You give me some gin and I might eat a dog's brain. What? I was just dying. Like, I might eat a dog. You give me some gin and I might eat a dog's brain? What the fuck? And he just keeps going. He's like, he goes like three different things first. He's like, my name is Chucky. Some say I'm insane. Give me some gin. I might eat a dog's brain. Give me a motherfucking 15 pack, and I'll be damned if I don't bring 15 dead niggas back. I was like, this is some hardcore shit. And then, it had another song called, what was it? What was the name of that song? Mind of a Lunatic, which was just, whew. I mean, I was scared when I first heard that fucking song, Mind of a Lunatic. I mean, that's just some, it just puts you right there. It was too hardcore even. You know what I mean? Because like when you would watch like a horror movie, and you see somebody get killed, there was always that thing of like, this is a movie, this is, even as gory and as realistic as they could get it. Blowing somebody's brains out or whatever it might be. There's always still that thing where, okay, you always knew where the line was and you knew this was fantasy. But here's the Ghetto Boys and Bushwick Bill and Mind of a Lunatic, and, he's talking about raping and killing this chick and then having sex with her corpse. I was like, what? She begged me not to kill her. I gave her a rose, then slit her throat and watched her shake till her eyes closed. What? I mean, that shit, dude, the first time I heard that shit, I was like, oh my fucking God. Because, you hear about like somebody twitching, somebody's body twitching as they're dying. I mean, this is graphically describing, this is beyond some fucking Jason or Freddy, Freddy Krueger shit here. This is not fun and games. This is like literally like some sicko murderer shit. Like these guys sound like they have really murdered someone. She begged me not to kill her. I gave her a rose, then I slit her throat and watched her shake till her eyes closed. Had sex with her corpse before I left her and drew my name on the wall like Helter Skelter. What? I mean, I heard that shit and I was like, oh, yeah. I mean, you're like, I think these motherfuckers really did murder somebody. Like, it made you uncomfortable listening to it because you're like, it wasn't fun and games anymore. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, oh, ha, ha, this is funny. Because the rest of the shit up to that point had been kind of, gangster love and all that, I need bitches, all kinds of bitches, to take off my shirt and pull down my britches. If she's got big titties, I'll squeeze them and hold them while she sucks my dick and licks my scrotum. I mean, shit like that's just hilarious. You died laughing, but man, we got to Mind the Lunatic. And then Manson took that shit. Manson did like a fucking 20-minute like acoustic version of Mind of a Lunatic, and it was even more fucking disturbing. I thought the fucking Ghetto Boys version of that was disturbing. Jesus, leave it to Marilyn Manson. He took it to a whole other level. Like a 20-minute acoustic version where he's like doing it like kind of spoken word, And it's even more terrifying because he's like, she begged me not to kill her. I gave her a rose, then slit her throat and watched her shake till her eyes closed. Had sex with her corpse before I left her. It was just even more like, oh my fucking God, this is Creep Fest. And, after that, I didn't really hear much. I didn't hear anything else with the Ghetto Boys for a while. And then, I think I was like in 8th grade. That was when the song Mind Playing Tricks on Me came out. And that was, that was it. Anybody else remember The Box? Anybody remember The Box? Some people I talk to remember that. Some people don't. The Box, it was like back in the day before, if you lived out in the country, out in the rural area and stuff back in the day, you got whatever you could get on, an antenna, open air TV, and that was it. You couldn't get cable. There was no direct TV and shit like that back then. The only thing you could get was one of those big ass 1980s fucking Gigantor. Remember those? The big ass satellite dishes that you put in your backyard? My aunt and uncle had one. Some of my friends had one. But anyway, they had this thing called the box. You got to remember, this is like before, TiVo boxes and pay-per-view or anything digital. But it was a thing where you could actually, it had like codes and stuff that you would type into the keypad of the remote. And you could request videos and they would play them. Like whatever you requested, you do it and they would play it. And I remember going to my friend's house and he was like, man, you're not going to believe this. Watch this. And he had the box on and he turned it on and it was the video for Mind Playing Tricks on Me, the Ghetto Boys. And I was just fucking floored. My mind was blown. The part with Bushwick Bill's verse, and this year Halloween fell on a weekend, and he's like, he was a midget, so he like runs. He's going to punch his dude, but like we kept rolling. My friend recorded it on VHS too. We would rewind it to this part every time, just watch it over and over again. So it's part of the video, and we would just die laughing, man. We would sit there all night and just watch that part over and over where Bushwick Bill, it's like this dude's like, right, maybe 5 or 6 feet from him, right? It's on the line, something. This wasn't no ordinary nigga. He stood about 6 or 7 feet. Now that's the nigga I'll be seeing in my sleep. And like you see him like so we triple teamed on him, dropping them motherfucking bees on. You see Bushwick Bill, this dude is like only like 5 or 6 feet from him, right? But he takes like this running leap from like 6 feet away. And like, I guess because he had just little legs and stuff. He get like a running start. And he like runs up and he leaps over there and just punches that dude right in the fucking mouth. Oh my fucking God, dude. We used to roll over and fucking laugh. And then, a couple of years later, they came out. I remember next album they came out with, it wasn't as good. I think it had like one good song on it. I think it had Damn It Feels Good to Be a Gangster, which they ended up later using. Mike Judge ended up using in his film Office Space in 1999. But yeah, after about 1992, after that, they completely dropped off the map for me. But, I've never stopped listening to those. I mean, to me, they didn't, the first 2 or 3 records, because they had the early records, and those aren't as good. They had some of the songs, but then they got with Rick Rubin, and that's when they put out the first black and white, the self-titled Ghetto Boys album. Then We Can't Be Stopped after that. First 2 or 3 after that, are good. After that, they kind of fell off me. I kind of, I lost track of what they were doing for a lot of years. And didn't even really realize they were, even back together until around the time when Office Space came out. But I always listened to those first 2, the self-titled black and white cover Ghetto Boys album and We Can't Be Stopped, are just amongst 2 of the greatest hip-hop albums ever made. I mean, these fucking mumble rappers of today can't even hold a fucking candle to the Ghetto Boys. But, and everything now, there's no groups anymore. Everything now is solo artists, and it's all so diluted and crap. I liked it way better when you had groups, man, because the groups became like gangs and you had, individual personalities within that group and different styles within the group, and they'd all come together. I just always preferred the rap group, in my opinion, to the individual rapper, But a lot of guys still had that, even though Tupac was only Tupac, a lot of his tracks he would have. And they would do, to me, I think, I think if you had to list the top 5 or top 10 hip hop groups of all time, there's just no way you don't have the Ghetto Boys in there. If you don't, you just don't know what you're talking about. Top 10 of all time? Top 10 of all time is probably pretty easy to do. It's much more difficult, I think, to do the top 5. You know what I mean? Let's just go right off the top. First 3, to me, the first 3 would be easy. right off the top, I think you'd have to say Ghetto Boys, NWA, Wu-Tang Clan. Then you could get dicey, then after that, then I'd probably say Public Enemy and Run DMC. That'd probably be a top 5. If you get into a top 10, then there's more after that. Then you definitely have to throw Cypress Hill, Beastie Boys, stuff like that in there. For me, anyway, because that was the first hip hop I ever saw live. Strange, funnily enough, I guess that's growing up in the suburbs, being a whitey in the suburbs. But the first hip hop I ever saw live was not, because I'll be honest with you, parents weren't going to didn't let their kids go see rap a lot back then. But the first hip hop I ever saw, man, I was telling my sister this story. I was thinking about this the other day because my uncle had sent me some stuff about my dad going to concerts and stuff, and it reminded me of this. Here in Dallas, there used to be this place called the Sportatorium, and it was originally built back in the 40s or 50s, and it's where all the local wrestling took place, and a lot of the stars that later became wrestling stars in what later became the WWF before it became the WWE, started in the local wrestling circuit here in Dallas. You had the Von Erichs, the most prominent ones of that time. You had the Von Erichs. That was another thing I traced back a while back that blew my mind. I was trying to trace back when I first got into Rush. Somebody asked me how I first got into Rush, and I was trying to think back to it, and when I remembered, it blew my mind, It's like, holy shit, because you forget sometimes, you got to trace back your memories, and then you think, and, for a long time, it doesn't seem like anything to you, but after enough time passes and you remember back, you're like, wow. It blew my mind, man, when I remember back as to how I got into Rush initially, and it was because of Kerry Von Erich and the local wrestling, world-class championship wrestling came on every Saturday night in Dallas, and they wrestled right here locally. He came out. He was named back then was the Modern Day Warrior. And he used to come walk into the ring at the Sportatorium to Tom Sawyer by Rush. And for the longest time, I didn't know who sang. I just knew it as the Modern Day Warrior song. I didn't even know it was called Tom Sawyer. I just thought it was. I call it the Modern Day Warrior song. And I remember I was at school one time when I was talking at lunch or whatever. I was talking to this girl about music and stuff, and I was telling her, like, yeah, I can't figure out who sang this song. It's Modern Day Warrior song. It says Modern Day, and Kerry Von Erich used to walk out to it. She's like, oh, I think I know what it is, but I can't remember. And you could never find it. I would always ask around. And I remember asking my uncle, and he didn't know, and I thought he would know because, he was all into all the wrestling and stuff. And then, like, last year, I couldn't believe this. I was like, well, I'm glad I didn't ask him. He obviously don't fucking know anything. My uncle last year said, hey, do you know what? It was another one of the Von Erichs. I can't remember which one. He sent me this video from a old wrestling match at Texas Stadium. And he was like, hey, can you tell me what so-and-so Von Erich, can you tell me what song this is he's walking out to? I didn't have to even fucking listen to it, man. He's like, I've been for years trying to figure out who it is. And I listened to it and I'm like, fucking Stranglehold by Ted Nugent? My fucking uncle didn't. I'm like, are you? He's from that era. I have an excuse. I was a year old when that song came out. My uncle was a teenager. Come on, dude. How can you be in your 50s and not know fucking Stranglehold by Nugent? I was just like, I can't even believe I'm related to you. It was mind-blowing. How could my uncle not know fucking who sang fucking Stranglehold. Nugent, man. Come on. But, yeah, going back to what I was saying, you think back sometimes on these things, and how you first got into, this music and stuff and these different things. But, yeah, there's very few artists, that when I hear it takes me right back to that time. But I'll read this article here. I think this is a great article. It's written by Kiana Fitzgerald at Rolling Stone. Not very often is there anything that Rolling Stone puts out that's worth a fuck, but this article they put out on Bushwick Bill is great. I want to read it for you. On June 19th, 1991, Bushwick Bill was pronounced dead. He shot himself in the eye that day after suicidal ideations and a prolonged argument with his girlfriend. The rapper, born Richard Stephen Shaw, was only 24 at the time, but he had already lived multiple lives. Less than 3 hours after his death, he awoke in the morgue. According to Bill, he had a toe tag and was being prepared for an autopsy. In his own words, he hopped up, pulled out a catheter, urinated in a cup, and sent the patrolling officer and hospital tech running. It wasn't but long before Jay Prince, founder of the Rap-A-Lot label Bill was signed to as a member of the Ghetto Boys, got word of what had happened. Ever the cunning businessman, Prince ordered Bill's group mates, Scarface and Willie D, to go to the hospital and take what would become one of the most iconic album covers ever for We Can't Be Stopped. With Willie D standing to his right and Scarface to his left, Bill, swollen from the trauma of a gunshot wound to the face, holds an era-appropriate cell phone up to his ear, the Gordon Gekko brick. The gauze that was supposed to be covering his injured eye pulled down. This photo became the most well-known representation of Bushwick Bill. It became so popular that it threatened to overshadow the art of the band at its center, and years later the group would express regret at ever taking it. But Bill's body of work and indefatigably charming character made sure that he would never only be remembered as the dwarf with the missing eye. And now I remember where I had lost my track. I was going back to because I was talking about the story I thought of with my dad. I was talking about the Sportatorium. Anyway, the Sportatorium, it was they had wrestling. It was all the big wrestling there. The Dingo Warrior, he later became the Ultimate Warrior. He started there. Iceman, King Parsons, all these great wrestlers. But back in the day, they had concerts there. They had boxing there. And my grandpa and my great uncle saw Hank Williams Sr. there at the Sportatorium in the 1950s. And my dad saw a whole slew of people there in the 70s. He saw Willie Nelson there. And that's how I got back on the thinking about the Sportatorium week or so, because my uncle sent me a message talking about there was this picture he used to have, and he was trying to find it. It was a picture of Willie Nelson at the Sportatorium, and it was in the Dallas Times-Herald newspaper. And he was in the picture that they put in the newspaper. He was wearing my dad's cowboy hat in the picture. And so I was telling the story because my dad was always talking about the Sportatorium and all that. I remember in 1992, this is the first ever hip hop, around the first time I'd ever saw any hip hop live. And so I was going to a concert, and I was like 16 at the time. I didn't have my license yet. I had my permit or something, or I might have had my learner's permit. I can't remember, but I didn't have my full license just yet, but I was just about to get it. But anyway, I had some friends that were going to go, and their parents were going to give me a ride home, but I needed a ride to get there. So I asked my dad, I was like, hey, Dad, can you give me a ride to this concert on Friday? And he was like, yeah, man, no problem. Sure. Where's it at? And I'm like, he goes, well, where's it at? He starts rattling off all the usual places, in Dallas. Sure. Where's it at? Sure. Where's it at? Is it at, Starplex? Is it Starplex, Deep Ellum, Bronco Bowl, Fair Park? Where's it at? It's at the Sportatorium. The Sportatorium? God damn! I saw Willie. They start freaking out. He's like, oh, you got to be careful down there. I'm like, no, that's cool. And this is who I went to go see. Rollins Band, Cypress Hill, and the Beastie Boys. Check Your Head tour. 1992, baby. The Sportatorium. Dude, that place was a fucking firebox. It burned up one time, burnt to the ground. They rebuilt it. This is back when you could still smoke indoors. Dude, they oversold this place. It wasn't a very big place anyway. It was packed to the gills. They sold about 3 times as many tickets as they should have for this thing. They oversold the fuck out of the show. Even already by that point, Beastie Boys were way too big to be playing at the fucking Sportatorium. Yeah, dude. Rollins Band played first, then Cypress Hill, and then the Beastie Boys. You want to talk about a fucking show. So, yeah, it was just interesting to think about that. 3 generations of my family of the Reeves saw concerts at that fucking place, man. And wrestling, too. I know I went to a couple of matches there. And I remember the Ghetto Boys came and played at Trees in Dallas. And normally I could get in that, but for some reason they were, I guess because of their content, they weren't letting anybody in that night. But me and my friends went down and just stood outside. And basically, I mean, I didn't get to see the Ghetto Boys, but I got to hear the Ghetto Boys from outside playing on stage, and it was amazing. I mean, it was fucking incredible. Bushwick Bill began his career as a dancer after moving to Brooklyn from his homeland of Jamaica. He was a breakdancing genius, according to a 2014 conversation with the Canadian interview Nardwar, and also dabbled in graffiti work and DJing. It wasn't until he moved to the South, Houston specifically, that he tried his hand at rapping, as Bill told it. While he was a dancer for the Rap-A-Lot group, the Ghetto Boys, producer John Beto heard him reciting Public Enemy's Rebel Without a Pause. Beto informed Jay Prince of Bill's abilities, who then made Bill an official MC in the group and 1/3 of the group's most iconic lineup, alongside Houstonians Willie D and Scarface, the Ghetto Boys. Like many fans, my introduction to Bushwick Bill was his closing verse on the Ghetto Boys' most popular song, Mind Playing Tricks on Me. It was released in 1991, 2 years after I was born. My late mother suffered from depression and other undiagnosed mental health issues. It became her favorite song of mine. I heard it on long car rides out in the Texas country with my mom, brother, and sister. Wow. Holy shit. That's just crazy. And this person who wrote this is obviously a lot younger than me. If they were born in 89, they'd be 30, so, and I'm 42, I'll be 43 next month. But yeah, God, that just took me back. Just that line, you know, long car rides out in the Texas country, because I lived out in the rural area. I lived out in the country, so and that's what it takes. Man, it takes me right back. You know, I could see all my friends' faces from the 8th grade. It's crazy. It's wild. You know, I don't oftentimes like to get nostalgic and get into, you know, sentimentality and stuff, but it's amazing how music can do that to you more than anything else. You know, it's crazy. I guess, and maybe it just, I notice it more. It affects me more now that I've gotten older, you know. You tend to get that way, I think, a little bit more as you get older. And it's like that for me now. It's so weird. There's certain music I'll hear now, and it's just like, it gets me emotional, man, when I hear it, because it just takes me back to, you know, a time that's gone, you know, and will never return. And in a time in your life, you know, when you're at that age, you know, particularly the teenage years, you know, and middle part, you know, teens or late teens, and, you know, when you're trying to figure out how to become an adult and stuff, and everything's, you know, you're just a fucking ball of emotions anyway at that time, you know, and you're fucking rebelling against everything, and hormones, you want to fuck something, stick something in fucking whatever, and everything's new. But it's just so, there's certain music, man, from that period, not a lot of it, but just certain, you know, things that I hear And it just gets me emotional. It gets me really thinking about that time, you know. But I just like the way, I mean, it's I can really relate to the person who wrote this article, that whole experience of being out, you know, cruising in the Texas countryside, you know, nothing to do out there, especially the days before the internet or any of that stuff, you know. She says, my mom wouldn't recite Scarface or Willie D's complete lyrics, instead mimicking the bass line of the song, borrowed from Isaac Hayes' Hung Up on My Baby. Yes, and you know what, motherfucker? Nobody knew that for a long time. Before the internet, nobody knew that, but I was one of those motherfuckers I was obsessed with shit like that. Like if I heard something cool, you know, a sample in a hip-hop song, I wanted to know what it was. You know, just like when I research stuff now, I got to know. I was the same way then, and I'll never forget. I think it was one of my friends' moms or dads or somebody. Because I kept trying to, you know, man, do you know what this is? That guitar part. Then I felt just like a theme. That's what it's from. And one of my friend's parents was, hey, check this out. And it was a soundtrack. I can't remember what movie it was. They had it on vinyl. It was one of those 70s. It was one of those 70s blaxploitation films that had Isaac Hayes in it. And that's where that sample in Mind Playing Tricks on Me comes from, the song Hung Up on My Baby. But nobody knew that. I remember when I first found that out, it was like discovering it. It was like you were discovering like the fucking secret of life, you know? Like you really felt like you were discovering something nobody else knew, you know? When it came time for Bushwick Bill's verse, though, she came alive. The bars, which tell the story of a hallucinated jumping of a fearsome figure on Halloween night, were penned by Scarface, but Bill's delivery of the lines turned into his own. This is how genius the Ghetto Boys were. Actually, if you listen to that song, Mind Playing Tricks on Me, each verse is a different state, a different type of mental state. And some of the stuff they were talking about in that song was PTSD before anybody knew what PTSD was. You know, people have been experiencing PTSD for years, but as far as that terminology, it's relatively new terminology. Back then, they just called it, you know, traumatized or everything else. But each verse of that song is a different mental state. It goes from paranoia to, you know, schizophrenia, PTSD. Each verse in that song is a different mental state. His exaggerated enunciations made his verse memorable and borderline comical. Yeah, it was comical. That's why I stopped being interested in hip hop shortly after this. It was because, well, probably Wu-Tang Clan was the last group where I was like, all right, you know, they're good or whatever, but it wasn't funny anymore. You know, it got too serious. It got too, I don't know, just started taking itself too serious. It got up its own ass, as all music does. I mean, you know, any type of music that becomes popular in the mainstream eventually gets up its own ass and becomes, you know, whether it be rock or anything. You know, once it gets up its own ass, can't see the forest for the trees, it's not good anymore. But yeah, that was the thing about hip hop and some of that early stuff then, especially, I think without question, the just like the heyday for, you know, rock music was the 70s. I think without question, the heyday for hip hop was the 1990s. I mean, I just don't think you can. Was there some good stuff made after that time period? Sure, just like there was great stuff made after the 70s as far as rock music. But if you want to talk about, you know, the prime decade for whatever particular type of music, hip hop in the 1990s, that was the heyday, 100%. But yeah, that's what made it great. You know, it got too serious later. You couldn't laugh at it, you know, because it wasn't laughing at itself when it started taking itself too seriously. Because it was pure entertainment. I got to tell you, man, the days before the internet and stuff, but all you had was a VCR, a a card to the video store to rent shit, and a tape player or, a record player or a CD player or something, man. Sitting around with your friends, listening to these lyrics and just listen to what they say and cracking up. Oh, man, play it again. Oh, I got to hear it again. It's so funny. I just don't think there'll ever be something like that again. You know what I mean? I just don't think there will ever be. Nobody will ever have that type. There's certain experiences that, or you just never have again. That's why some of there's certain movies like, that you watch now from the 80s and you're like, they could never redo this now because this whole movie would be made null and void by shit like fucking smartphones and, like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. That's a good example. Ferris Bueller's Day Off, well, we would never have, you could never remake that movie with current technology, So there's lots of them like that. But I think about that sometimes, because it just goes back to the same thing where, we might have we always, I guess when we were younger, when you look into the future, you always think that, man, it's going to be great when technology gets here. But, man, technology has ruined a lot of things in a lot of ways. It's ruined a lot of experiences, That's one of the great things about vinyl coming back is that, having it's a relationship. It's an experience with music, that you don't have anymore that you get with vinyl. You're supposed to experience the whole thing. Everything about it is part of the experience. The cover, the smell of it when you open it up, and you don't get that from a download or from streaming or anything. But people don't want it anymore because it's not it wasn't a part of their lives at the beginning of their lives. So it being there now makes no difference to them. There's so many things like that, And, yeah, it's saying some of the lyrics here to Mind Playing Tricks. I'm not going to go through the lyrics again, but Bill, who stood approximately 3'8", was playing the comic foil as he often would, and with that role imbued the song with something unforgettable. Mind Playing Tricks on Me was a family anchor, but it became something more for me. Once I was diagnosed as bipolar 1 in 2016, upon being discharged from a Bronx hospital, I came home to Texas. My mother had long since passed, so home meant my sister's apartment. I wasn't quite myself, and my sister was determined to get me back on track. The easiest way to do that was by playing music that we loved, including Mind Playing Tricks on Me. As dedicated millennials, we hopped right on Snapchat to recite lines of Bushwick Bill's verse. Then I felt just like a feed. It wasn't even close to Halloween. We recalled with accompanying hand gestures. When I watch the video back now, I see genuine smiles on both of our faces, despite the gravity of the circumstances that brought me home. Home is where I am now, recovering from another manic episode and a paranoid schizophrenic diagnosis. Home is where I finally and fully appreciate the verses of Scarface and Willie D, but especially Bushwick Bill, whose presence on the track lit my mother's eyes up with joy and later brought life back into my own. Mind Playing Tricks on Me went gold and reached number 23 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 1 on the Hot Rap charts. It was a song that put Texas rap on the map and inspired other acts coming out of the state. Listen, that's the truth. Not only did they put Texas rap on the map, they put Southern rap in general on the cover. Nobody was looking to the South for hip-hop and rap before the Ghetto Boys came out. They really weren't. Everything that came out of the South after the Ghetto Boys happened because of them. That they deserve their place in music history and deserve for that alone. Nobody, you think about how many rappers have come out of the South since then. But at the time, it was unheard of. I can remember hearing, what was it, when Dr. Dre's Chronic album came out? And he said, and the motherfucking DOC No one can do it better. That I remember that blew my mind because DOC was, he had the album No One Can Do It Better. He was local. He was from Dallas. And he was like the only like rapper that was even known in Dallas at that time, in the early 90s. And that just blew my mind when I first heard that record because I was like, wow, how the fuck? How does Dr. Dre know who the DOC is, you know? And yeah, it was just, that was a mind-blowing thing at the time. Yeah, they really, really, really did. There was, nobody was even considering Texas to be anything for hip-hop at the time. It just, there wasn't anybody that was really doing it. And so when they came out with that, yeah, it put a lot of attention on Texas and specifically Houston at that time. I'm not going to read all this. It's a good article, but nonetheless, I just wanted to pay tribute to Bushwick Bill and say rest in peace. He got the, it was strange too. It was one of those weird things, you know, that happens where they report, it happens a lot, you know, they report somebody dead and then the family comes out and says, this is ridiculous. This is crazy. This happened on Sunday. Some of the other ghetto boys, Willie D, Scarface, they early in the day put rest in peace Bushwick Bill. There was a rest in peace Bushwick Bill going all around the internet. And there was news outlets reporting that he was dead. And then his son came out and put a press release out and said, you know, these people are slandering my dad's name. He's not dead. He's alive. He's with his family. He's you know, he's got, apparently he was diagnosed a few months ago with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And, man, you know, I just read that article, a month ago about the guy that, remember that he had pancreatic cancer or carcinoma or one of those, and he took the dog dewormer stuff and it cured him, man. But you know what's interesting? That's exactly what took Bill Hicks out. And Bill Hicks was from Houston too. Man, y'all, you know what? Y'all can talk all the shit about Texas you want, man. Being from Texas, I got to tell you, we got to put up with a lot of bullshit because of those goddamn Bushes that aren't even from fucking Texas or from fucking Kennebunkport, fucking Maine, bunch of carpetbaggers. We get lumped in with that. But hey, listen, man, we've given y'all a lot of legends. Y'all can talk shit on Texas, man, but we've given y'all a lot of legends, man. We gave you Buddy Holly. We gave you Waylon Jennings. We gave you Willie Nelson. We gave you Stevie Ray Vaughan. We gave you Pantera. We gave you the Ghetto Boys. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. I really can't think of anywhere else that's, I don't know, man, across all genres. You look at what Texas has produced. I mean, just right here in Dallas alone, we gave you Pantera, Stevie Ray Vaughan, and B.W. Stevenson. A lot of people don't know who he is, but if you've seen Lost Secrets of Ancient America Volume 2, I've got some of his music in there. Which, by the way, I had to license from who? Universal Music Group. So we know who owns his masters. And there's so many of his records, man, that just you can't even get. You can only get them on vinyl. They were never produced on CD. It's crazy. Anyway, yeah, that's it. I just want to pay tribute to Bushwick Bill and the Ghetto Boys because they're legends and they deserve to be in the conversation as far as you know, how influential they were and just how things were, you know, you like I said, you know, you had NWA when they came out, but there was something, and I don't think you would have a Ghetto Boys without NWA, of course not. But there was something, whereas with NWA, you kind of, you know, some of that stuff, some of the Dre stuff, some of the Cube stuff. I don't know. Sometimes it felt like it was, it was being forced and wasn't real. You never got that with the Ghetto Boys. I mean, that shit was worryingly real. Like, you're really like these motherfuckers are really, they're like really murdering people. I had this one song about, he was like fucking this girl or something, and a hitman was climbing up the balcony or something. And he was like, I forget what something about, like Mike Tyson in the fourth, boy, I was jabbing. It was like jabbing and shit. And like he looks up and the girl was cooked. Her head exploded. Like he's fucking this girl and this dude sneaks in to try to assassinate him while he's having sex, and he shoots at him but ends up hitting the girl in the head and her head explodes while she's on top of him fucking him. I mean, that was some fucking crazy shit, man. Like you hear that in NWA. Like, this is fucking wild, man. This is some different shit. And like fucking Gangsta Love, they had the like, well, the original version actually had the Gangsta Love Steve Miller version, and then they couldn't get permission to use it, so they ended up switching it in the later versions to Sweet Home Alabama. They just have that loop of that down, turn it up. And so when they would loop it, every time it would loop around, you'd hear the turn it up on the Ghetto Boys version. It would just come back around, That's probably the one that made me laugh the most, was that song. The Gangster Love song. God damn. I just had some shit in there that just, I just never heard before. I mean, some really filthy stuff, She fucked me till I was coming. Put my nuts in her mouth and started humming. I used to die listening to that. It was like, man, you ain't hearing that on any Kiss records. I'm telling you right now. You might hear some, Gene Simmons say some shit like, I want to put my log in your fireplace, or I thought about the back door and I didn't know what to say, but man, he sure as fuck wasn't saying, put my nuts in your mouth and started humming. Oh my God. That is fucking hilarious. And I don't know. I think to me, in my opinion, where, the point at which hip hop lost that and got up its own ass and took itself too seriously. I mean, to me at that point, it was dead. Because that was the spirit of it beginning. It was, it was supposed to be fun. It wasn't supposed to be like, yeah, I get the most bitches and I got the most money, and the bitches and money and hoes and bitches and hoes and money and the bitches and hoes and the bitches and the hoes and the money and hoes and the hoes and the bitches and the money and hoes. It's like, fucking, I don't want to fucking hear about the bitches and the money and hoes no more. I want to hear about fucking, I think the greatest Bushwick Bill, just to wrap up the Bushwick Bill stuff, I think the fucking greatest Bushwick Bill line of all time had to be where he says, this is, I think I was crying, I think the first time I heard this, rolling around the carpet in my grandparents' house. Just never forget this. I don't even know. God, can I even say this now? This is hilarious. Again, I'm quoting song lyrics here. Don't get mad if I say the N-word. I'm strictly quoting lyrics, which, by the way, I defer to Ice-T on that. Because Ice-T says the rule is why people get a pass on saying the N-word so long as they are saying it in the lyrics of a song. So I defer to Ice-T on that rule. But this is my favorite. To me, this is the definitive Bushwick Bill lyric. When you're getting on your knees to fuck, a nigga like me is still standing up. And I mean, the first time I heard that, and it, because you immediately, because he's a dwarf, okay? You know he's a dwarf. And you hear, when you're getting on your knees to fuck a nigga like me still standing up. I mean, I fucking fell off the bed. I rolled around on the fucking carpet. I had tears. I about pissed myself because it's the image of a dwarf. You know what I mean? Like you getting on when you're getting on your knees. I'm still standing. Like you're getting ready to have sex with a girl and do her doggy style. But meanwhile, you get an image in your head of this dwarf where he's not having to get on his knees to do doggy. He's standing flat-footed on the bed with his sneakers on. That's the image that you get in your head when you hear that line. Which all I could see was this little midget black guy with his kicks, standing up on the bed with his kicks and doing the girl doggy style. And you're thinking, you had to get on your knees when you get on your knees to fuck a nigga like me still standing up. I mean, I don't think I ever laughed harder than that when I heard it. Was just like, what the fuck? I just couldn't understand that anyone could even get away with saying that. Yeah, I mean, greatness, man. So, rest in peace, Bushwick Bill. Thank you so much for just all the great memories and all the hilarious lines and there's a few of those artists, that become part of the fabric of the soundtrack of your life. And for me, Bushwick Bill and the Ghetto Boys are definitely one of those. So I salute you, brother. We're going to miss you, man. A true original. I heard a great story from the comedian Ralphie May one time. Rest in peace, Ralphie May. He's not with us anymore. He's damn. Because he was from Houston, and he was driving down the road. Ralphie May, the comedian, was driving down the road one day, right on the highway in Houston. And he saw a car pulled over on the side of the road that had just had a flat tire, a blowout or something, like right in front of him. So he pulled off to the side real quick to help this person with their car. And he gets over to the car and to help this person. And when he gets over there, hey, you got to, I want to help you out with it. And who is it? It's fucking Bushwick Bill. I can't, I wish there was footage of that. Can you imagine that? How that exchange must have went? I mean, Ralphie May was like fucking 600 pounds or something. Can you imagine seeing that? Can you imagine driving down the highway and seeing this like 600 or 700 pound white dude on the side of the fucking freeway in Houston, which is screwed. You think traffic's bad in your fucking town. Unless you live in LA, dude, Houston's the worst. I just can't fucking imagine driving down the highway and seeing 600 pound Ralphie May out there with some 3'8" black dude, Bushwick Bill, and he's helping him change it. I mean, it's just fucking hilarious. Only in Texas, man. But, yeah. Salute to you, Bushwick Bill, and we'll never forget you, my friend. You're definitely going to be remembered. That's for sure. I've got a ton of other fucking crazy news and shit to get into. But since I haven't been on air in a while here, it's going to take me a while to get through it. I've already done 2 hours here for you now. I was only going to do an hour. And I still haven't even scratched the surface. But that's good news. We'll have lots to get in for you on the show tomorrow. Don't forget, we got our goal. We got to raise $300 minimum the next 24 hours. I just haven't been able to get anything done because we've been sitting on zero pretty much all month. I got in $20 today. That's about as good as it's gotten. So get yourself some downloads, get yourself a membership to the archives. I'll talk about this tomorrow, but I heard they're basically, I think my days are probably going to be numbered from what I understand on YouTube. They're cracking down even more. They've already been doing more ridiculous shit. They're going to do even more. They're going to start deleting people's accounts that for even being what they consider not in any violation of their user agreement, but what they consider to be borderline. So, I mean, if you thought it was bad already, it's only going to get worse, folks. And there's probably going to be a day where it's going to look like I just disappeared or quit or something. Like my whole YouTube channel and all my content is going to be gone because they're going to give you any notice. They're not going to give you a chance to pull any of your shit down. They're just going to delete you. And, if that day comes, you need to know I'm never going to quit. And, getting yourself a membership to our members archives is the way to ensure that you always get the show, because no matter what happens with YouTube, that's where the show's going to be at. But it's going to be very difficult for me to contact all the nearly 17,000 people we have subscribed to this channel now, which is just honestly blown up in the past year. From not having we've got a lot of new subscribers, man. It's really starting to pick up, which, tells me now I don't know. I just don't see that we're going to survive. They're talking about deleting entire channels now that have content that they consider to be borderline, not even in any violation of their terms of service, but what they consider to be borderline, but yet they're not giving anybody any information, just like they didn't give me any information when they demonetized my channel. Well, fix what's wrong with your channel, and then you can apply to remonetize. Well, you didn't tell me any reason, because when I contacted your support, they said I wasn't in violation of any. Because that's this conflict between their algorithm and the real world, and it's causing problems. So I'll read the article and get more into that for you tomorrow's show. But just be aware that this is getting bad. They're cracking down on this. Remember I told you a while back I thought Joe Rogan knew something was coming down the pipe that he had inside information on that he wasn't talking about? This is it. That's why he's been being so paranoid, about playing the smallest little clip on his show. We're going to get taken off YouTube. I was like, why is he acting all of a sudden, not smoking on camera anymore, not smoking any weed on camera anymore, not doing the shows live, they're all pre-taped. I knew something was going on. And he had that fucking disinfo fucking clown Eddie Bravo on there. Watch that most recent show. You want to see some of the most shilltacular shillfest you've ever seen? Watch that show, the most recent show with Joe Rogan and Eddie Bravo, if you want to see the Shilly Shillenstein. Oh my God. Right as soon as Eddie Bravo starts getting into like some deeper shit, Joe starts shutting him down, cutting him off. The show, it's edited. Oh, I need to go to the bathroom. Every time he starts getting into, twice in the show, he starts getting into some deep stuff, and you just see Joe getting paranoid and freaked out about it. And then that article came out the day after that show aired that said they were going to start deleting stuff specifically that had to do with Flat Earth and 9/11 Truth, right? And what did Eddie specifically bring up in that show with Joe? Flat Earth and 9/11 Truth. And watch, Rogan gets fucking scared and starts freaking out and starts shutting Eddie down when he starts bringing that stuff up. But yet the article talking about that didn't come out until after that show aired. So that proves what I told you about a month ago. I told you that son of a bitch got inside information that something's coming down the pike. And that's why he's been changing. He's not doing his shows live anymore. He's editing the shows. He's not smoking weed. Had Be Real from Cypress Hill on there, and they didn't smoke any weed the entire episode. Are you kidding me? So these guys, I'm telling you, these guys know this is a planned thing. It's just like I told you when all the stuff, when they started shutting Jones down, how that was a planned and executed operation. Same thing here going on now. So again, if my channel just vaporizes and disappears off of YouTube and you can't find me and the Global Reality channel is not there and my videos are gone, just know I didn't quit. Find me on Facebook, email me, whatever. But, just because they start shutting everybody down on YouTube, hey, I was doing my show before YouTube, before people were uploading shows there, That's why I got the Podbean thing. And that's why I have the subscriptions. I've still got the lifetime memberships on sale for $300 if you want to get one. Limited time only. Anyway, I love you guys. Glad to be back with you again. Support my work. We need some cash in here. I'm on zero. I can't operate on zero. And I need everybody to help if you can. I'll be back with you tomorrow with more news and more crazy shit to talk about. Take care.